There are people who operate at an extraordinarily elevated frequency, so elevated that their lives begin to reveal three unmistakable signs. These signs have nothing to do with trendy spirituality, empty affirmations, or weekend wellness retreats. They don't emerge from forced positivity or discipline. They are energetic realities, tangible shifts that move through the body, the psyche, and the outer world when your inner architecture finally reaches deep coherence. Picture this. It's early. Morning, you're standing in front of the mirror, getting ready for another day at a job that drains your spirit. Nothing is technically wrong with your body, yet your stomach tightens with a quiet, persistent dread. Your shoulders feel as if an invisible weight has settled on top of them. You chalk it up to stress, pressure, routine, the normal exhaustion of adulthood. But somewhere deep inside you know better. Something is off, something essential. Millions of people live this silent battle. Every day, forcing themselves into roles that feel like custom-built cages. Maybe you recognize yourself in this. The quiet war between who the world expects you to be and who your authentic self keeps whispering that you truly are. But something extraordinary happens when your inner instrument finally tunes itself to the right frequency. The entire symphony of reality begins to shift. Life stops resisting you. The universe stops mirroring confusion and starts responding with clarity. It's not magic. It's not wishful thinking, it's alignment. What I'm about to reveal here on Unshakable Mind isn't spiritual poetry. It's not philosophy dressed up as inspiration. These are observable, almost scientific phenomena that occur when a human being reaches genuine psychic integration. And the first sign hits the body with brutal honesty. Your physical organism becomes a ruthless lie detector for your soul. Your body develops an immediate, unmistakable reaction to anything that contradicts your core truth. It's not subtle discomfort. It's not intuition. It's physiology. Imagine sitting in a job interview for a high-paying role, and every part of you is screaming no. Out of nowhere, a pounding migraine appears the moment you consider saying yes. Or a wave of nausea hits the very instant you begin agreeing to a project that violates your values. Your body becomes a resonance chamber for your truth, and it refuses to tolerate anything misaligned. People who experience this shift discover they can no longer tell even a small, harmless lie without feeling their throat tighten. They can't stay in rooms where dishonesty is the dominant currency without their chest clenching or their energy collapsing. Their biology physically pushes them toward truth. It stops being a moral preference and becomes a biological imperative. The second sign is far more unsettling because it dissolves the perceived boundary between your mind and the external world. Synchronicities begin to manifest with such frequency, accuracy, and timing that they openly mock statistical probability. You think of a highly specific question, and the next stranger behind you says the exact sentence you were pondering. You remember a childhood friend you haven't seen in 20 years, and the next day you randomly meet their sibling in a completely different city or country. When a person becomes psychologically integrated, the causal connection Jung described between psyche and matter intensifies. Reality stops behaving like a neutral backdrop and begins acting like a real-time feedback system for your inner state. The illusion of separation thins. Inner and outer start mirroring one another with uncanny precision. And then comes the third sign, the way people respond to your presence. Individuals with a highly integrated psyche rarely walk through the world unnoticed. Their energy is too clear, too defined, too unmistakable. Strangers react instantly and intensely, often without understanding why. You enter a room without saying a word, and some people immediately treat you with coldness or hostility. Their eyes harden, their posture closes, the air shifts. They don't know you, yet something in them recoils. Meanwhile, others approach you with surprising warmth, trust, or even admiration. They feel safe around you instantly, drawn to something in your presence they can't quite articulate. This has nothing to do with charisma or appearance. Integrated people act as unconscious mirrors. They trigger whatever is unintegrated in others. When someone feels sudden dislike toward you, they aren't defending themselves from you. They're reacting to the part of themselves your authenticity reflects, their unexpressed potential, their suppressed truth, their ignored wounds. Your presence interrupts their denial. Likewise, when someone feels immediate connection or respect, it's because they see in you a quality they desperately want to embody, but haven't yet allowed themselves to access. You don't have to do anything. Your existence alone stirs the waters. These three signs cannot be faked. They don't appear through spiritual hobbies, positivity journaling, or curated rituals. They arise only after a person confronts their inner chaos with brutal honesty and chooses wholeness over comfort. But with this emergence comes a dangerous trap, more dangerous than any shadow you've faced. The trap of spiritual ego. The temptation to see these signs as proof of superiority, enlightenment, or being above others. But that is not integration, that is inflation, an escape from reality disguised as ascension. Those who are truly aligned don't collect these phenomena as trophies. They don't use them as evidence of awakening. They simply live them. Their body protects their truth. Reality reflects their psyche. People respond to their energy. This becomes their new normal, not a spiritual milestone. This is the physics of a person who has ended the war within themselves. If you're ready to explore this journey deeper, to understand your own inner signals, and to strengthen the frequency of your authentic self, stay with me here on Unshakable Mind. Subscribe, share your experience in the comments, and allow this space to be your guide toward the self you were always meant to become. When you finally reach the later stages of inner integration, something extraordinary happens. The endless compulsion to dissect yourself, to analyze every emotion, every shadow, every symbolic movement of your psyche simply ends. Not because you've stopped caring, and not because you've transcended anything, but because the integration is complete enough that the mind no longer needs to chase itself in circles. Jung described individuation as the return to the self after a long and often dangerous descent through the shadow. When the opposites reconcile and the fragments of the psyche reintegrate, you come back to the point where everything began. But you return as someone entirely transformed. You no longer feel pulled to decode every spiritual sign or extract meaning from every coincidence. The mystical shine of synchronicity fades, not because it becomes less magical, but because it becomes familiar, expected, woven into the very architecture of your daily life. Your body's rejection of falseness stops feeling like a dramatic warning and becomes your new baseline. The projections of others no longer shock or confuse you. You simply see them for what they are, reflections of their own unintegrated inner world, bouncing off the clarity of your presence. This is the unmistakable sign of true psychic integration. When the signals cease to feel like signs and instead become the natural state in which you live, spiritual maturity reveals itself in the moment you no longer try to appear spiritual, no longer attempt to be conscious, no longer strive to be high vibrational. You simply are, because anything less than that would feel physically Impossible. Your frequency becomes so internally coherent, so non-negotiable, that even if you tried to abandon it, you couldn't. It's not a performance. It's not an identity. It's simply the only way of existing that makes sense. And in a strange way, this is the ultimate liberation. You become bound, not by limitation, but by truth. You are held in place by the deepest alignment of your being. You are finally, unshakably yourself. And this is exactly o que buscamos aqui, no canal, unshakable mind. A mente que não se fragmenta, não se dobra, não se trai. These three signs are not goals. They are not badges for your spiritual resume. They are consequences, inevitable outcomes of staying loyal to your authentic self long enough for inner division to crumble. When the running stops, when the denial stops, when the internal war ends, something inside you reorganizes itself at a fundamental level. And that reorganization leaves visible fingerprints on your body, your psyche, and the physical world around you. Your body becomes the uncompromising guardian of your truth. It simply refuses to allow deception, whether from you or from others. Even small acts of self-betrayal trigger visceral reactions. This isn't metaphorical, it is biological. Your nervous system evolves into a protective barrier that will not allow you to inhabit false identities or environments misaligned with your essence. You can no longer tolerate spaces that require you to shrink, hide, or perform. Your own biology initiates a rebellion and forces you back into coherence. The external world transforms too. Reality stops being a sequence of random events and becomes a fluid, responsive feedback loop. Synchronicities stop arriving as isolated bursts of magic and instead form a continuous living conversation between your inner state and the fabric of the world. Every encounter, every delay, every unexpected meeting becomes a piece of the intelligence that guides your path. You realize you can no longer afford the luxury of passivity. You must take radical responsibility for what you co-create, because reality is now tuned so precisely to your internal frequency that every shift within you echoes outward. And then, perhaps the most startling transformation of all, people react to your presence before you say a single word. You become a silent mirror reflecting hidden truths. Your energy activates what sleeps in others, their unused potential, their forgotten dreams, their suppressed shadows. You provoke reactions without trying. Some people feel inexplicable aversion, others feel instant safety or admiration. You can no longer fade into the background. Your frequency is too defined, too clear, too unmistakably real. But what does it actually mean to live at this level of coherence? What changes in the fabric of your everyday life? First, your relationship with time itself transforms. Those who vibrate at a deeply integrated frequency experience what Jung called kairos, a qualitative time. Moments align themselves with uncanny precision. Events unfold, not according to the rigid linearity of the clock, but according to an organic rhythm attuned to your inner world. You stop being late or early. Instead, you show up at the exact moment life intends. 5-minute conversations turn into life-altering hours. Long meetings shrink into the space of a few perfectly placed sentences. This isn't planning. It isn't efficiency. It is the natural synchrony that emerges. When the conscious and unconscious mind finally stop competing and begin working as one. Second, your sensitivity to other people's energy intensifies dramatically. You can sense instantly when someone is off-center, not through supernatural gifts, but through hyper-refined perception of micro-expressions, breath patterns, tonal shifts, subtle postural changes. This sensitivity can be overwhelming. Crowded spaces feel energetically abrasive. Superficial conversations feel draining. Environments filled with unresolved psychological tension hit your system like a distorted radio signal. Your nervous system has become too finely tuned to tolerate collective dissonance. Third, your relationship with material things changes, not because you reject the physical world, but because you can feel the energetic weight or resonance of objects, environments, and even clothing. Some spaces feel suffocating, while others feel expansive and alive. A simple old book may radiate more nourishment than an expensive electronic device. A small, modest room may feel more liberating than a luxurious home. The measure is no longer aesthetic or financial, it is vibrational compatibility. Fourth, your relationships undergo a profound shift. Shallow connections become impossible. Your system cannot maintain bonds built on projection, manipulation, or emotional codependency. At the same time, you begin attracting people who are ready for genuine, soul-level connection. These relationships often form quickly, intensely, and with a sense of inevitability, as if you are speaking a language beyond words. Fifth, and finally, your relationship with conflict changes entirely. Problems cease to appear as external antagonists and instead reveal themselves as internal misalignments that seek resolution. Persistent friction in a relationship or situation becomes a guide, a compass, pointing towards some part of you that has not yet been fully integrated. You stop fighting life and start listening to it. And as you move through this stage, you begin to understand something profound. Nothing in your reality is random anymore. Everything communicates, everything mirrors, everything participates in the ongoing dialogue between your inner world and the world outside. This is coherence, this is individuation, this is the level of being where life itself becomes your teacher, your mirror, and your co-creator. When you operate at a higher frequency, the very structure of your reality begins to reorganize itself. What once looked like bad luck, resistance, or random obstacles becomes a precise system of guidance, an internal compass that never lies. What feels like a problem in your job is no longer interpreted as misfortune, but as a sign that you're walking in a direction that betrays your authentic self. Your experience of time and space transforms first. Life stops unfolding as a rigid, linear sequence and begins to function like a living organism, breathing, pulsing, and synchronizing with your inner state. Jung called this kairos, the qualitative time that bends and rearranges itself around your psychological development. Meetings, encounters, and opportunities don't just happen. They arrive with surgical precision at the exact moment they are meant to. A conversation you expected to last 5 minutes suddenly blooms into something life-altering. A long, exhausting meeting you scheduled weeks in advance resolves itself in minutes, reaching a conclusion that feels natural, complete, and perfectly timed. This shift has nothing to do with better planning or external optimization. It is the natural consequence of inner coherence, of no longer having a conscious mind moving in one direction while the subconscious drags behind it in another. When your inner world stops fighting itself, the outer world stops fighting you as well. It aligns, it cooperates, it becomes an extension of your psyche. Your sensitivity to energy also intensifies with extraordinary sharpness. You begin to pick up on the emotional undercurrents of a room before anyone speaks, not because you're developing supernatural abilities, but because your perception becomes refined enough to catch details that others overlook. Micro shifts in breath, subtle fluctuations in tone of voice, barely detectable changes in posture. Crowded places and shallow conversations drain you quickly, not out of weakness, but because your nervous system reacts to collective psychic dissonance like a radio assaulted by static. You literally feel incoherence in the environment, and your body rejects it. Your relationship with material possessions changes as well, not out of asceticism or moral superiority, but because you instinctively differentiate between what resonates with your frequency and what drags you down. A simple, worn-out book may nourish you more deeply than an expensive device. A modest living space can feel more expansive and liberating than a luxurious mansion. The value of an object is no longer measured by its price, but by its energetic compatibility with who you are becoming. Interpersonal relationships undergo an even more radical transformation. Superficial bonds become impossible to maintain. Your system simply cannot tolerate relationships rooted in projection, manipulation, or unconscious codependency. Small talk feels physically painful, as if your entire being rejects the inauthenticity embedded in it. And yet, you begin attracting people who are ready, truly ready for depth, honesty, and unfiltered presence. These new connections unfold with an intensity and speed that others might find overwhelming, but to you, they feel natural, effortless, and predestined. It's as if you and the other person are speaking a silent language that exists beyond words, a dialogue from soul to soul. Conflict also stops looking like a problem. You start to understand it as a navigational instrument, a flashing indicator pointing toward an unresolved tension. Inside yourself, a recurring issue in a relationship is no longer an external disturbance, but a message from your unconscious urging integration. Professional setbacks are seen not as failures, but as redirection, signals that you're drifting away from your authentic path. This frequency shift comes with enormous responsibility. You can no longer drift passively through life. Every thought, every emotional ripple, every subtle movement of your inner world seems to produce immediate external resonance. The universe stops functioning as a neutral background and becomes a responsive feedback system that mirrors your deepest psychological currents. But here lies a hidden danger, the temptation to interpret these phenomena as evidence of superiority. Yet true integration does not inflate the ego, it dissolves it. Those who genuinely embody this frequency do not boast about their experiences. They don't need to. Their presence speaks louder than any spiritual claim. Their transformation is quiet, grounded, unmistakably real. This shift does not impact only the individual, it influences the collective unconscious itself. Your integrated frequency becomes a catalyst for healing in the people around you. Without trying to help anyone, you trigger change simply by existing in your truth. A colleague stuck in a destructive career path begins to contemplate a courageous shift. A friend trapped in repetitive relationship patterns suddenly discovers her inner strength. You don't force this transformation, you evoke it. Your energy becomes a tuning fork that awakens dormant potentials in others. Your career evolves into an expression of your inner calling. Decisions are no longer driven by fear, survival, or social expectation, but by alignment. Financial patterns change as well. Money stops being a tool for protection or control and becomes an energetic resource that supports your purpose. Income flows in ways that feel surprising, yet natural, emerging from coherence rather than effort. Creativity becomes an effortless expression of your essence. Projects, ideas, and artistic impulses don't require force. They flow from you as naturally as breath. You become a channel for a creative intelligence larger than the personality, something timeless, something ancient. Sexuality and intimacy shift into a higher realm. Relationships are no longer formed from lack or emotional hunger, but become conscious exchanges of spiritual energy, sacred encounters that elevate both. In partners, physical connection transforms into a fusion of presence, truth, and mutual awakening. And through all of this, you begin to sense the truth. You are no longer performing spirituality. You are embodying it. You are living from a place where inner coherence reshapes every corner of reality, quietly, powerfully, irrevocably. As your inner frequency begins to rise, your spiritual development stops being something esoteric or mystical. Instead, it becomes the profound ability to live the most ordinary moments with uncompromising awareness. Meditation is no longer a technique you practice. It becomes the natural state of your being. Mindfulness turns into your default operating mode, a silent presence that permeates everything you do. Your relationship with suffering changes at its core. Pain is no longer perceived as an enemy to defeat, but as a teacher that reveals truths you once avoided. Every challenge becomes an invitation to dive deeper into your authentic strength. True resilience doesn't come from defending yourself. It comes from unconditional acceptance. Spiritual growth loses its obsessive direction. You stop trying to reach consciousness and instead begin being consciousness. The search for enlightenment dissolves into the enlightenment of the search itself. A paradox resolved the moment you stop chasing it. This state isn't perfection. It's a dynamic equilibrium. You remain human, imperfect, vulnerable, flawed, but profoundly present. Integration does not mean becoming perfect. It means becoming whole. And this is where the real challenge begins. Not everyone around you will understand this transformation. Some will interpret your silence as distancing. Others will feel uncomfortable with your clarity. Confusion and loneliness become natural parts of the path. But your loyalty to your inner truth becomes far more important than any form of external approval. Your life slowly becomes a living work of art, not shaped by societal standards, but formed by the internal logic of your own evolution. You become the author of your existence, not through control, but through unconditional presence. As your inner frequency transforms, it doesn't remain only an individual experience. It becomes a system of resonance that influences everything and everyone around you. Each authentic elevation of consciousness acts as a subtle catalyst, impacting collective fields, social structures, and relational dynamics. Even in professional environments, people with deeply integrated psyches often shift entire organizational atmospheres without saying a word. Your presence alone disrupts rigid hierarchies and opens space for new forms of communication. Energetic intelligence stops feeling like a mystical force and becomes an internal navigation system. Precise, subtle, and incredibly accurate. You perceive what others cannot. Hidden conflicts, unconscious motivations, structural dissonances. The psychic fabric of systems becomes almost translucent to your perception. Spiritual development stops being self-improvement and becomes an ethical transformation. You become a living demonstration of integration, not because you are teaching it, but because your existence itself becomes the method. The physical dimension of your evolution goes far beyond psychology. Your physiology becomes almost scientifically precise in perceiving energetic states. Symptoms are no longer random medical events, but complex forms of systemic communication. Your immune system, hormonal flows, and neural networks synchronize into a highly intelligent information field. Your body becomes a sensory organ of consciousness, detecting instantly when your inner truth is being compromised by external demands. Even your sexual energy transforms. It shifts from a reproductive force to a creative force. Intimacy is no longer mechanical. It becomes a spiritual conversation, a mutual expansion of awareness. Creativity evolves from individual expression to a collaborative, transpersonal intelligence. Art becomes a field where consciousness communicates collectively. Your professional path changes too. Careers stop being linear. They stop being planned. Instead, they unfold naturally, guided by resonance rather than ambition. Money stops being a symbol of security and becomes a flow of energy. New opportunities appear synchronistically, emerging as a direct reflection of your inner coherence. Spiritual practice stops being a routine of techniques and becomes your natural state of existence. Meditation is not something you enter. It's something you never leave. Expansion no longer requires effort. It requires presence. Your transformation touches the collective unconscious. Your personal evolution becomes a field of resonance that supports social healing. Political and social systems are subtly challenged by individuals with integrated consciousness. Old paradigms of separation, competition, and control begin to dissolve as people discover their inner unity. Maturity doesn't show itself through supernatural abilities, but through your capacity to live ordinary things with extraordinary presence. Every moment becomes meditation. Every action becomes creative consciousness. The deepest wisdom reveals itself in the acceptance of your humanity, not in escaping it. But there is an ultimate challenge for those vibrating at higher frequencies. It isn't about reaching elevated states. It's about integrating them in a society that mostly vibrates at lower ones. Social isolation becomes inevitable, not out of arrogance, but because authentic connection becomes increasingly rare. Imagine returning to your old environment after a profound internal transformation. Conversations that once felt stimulating now seem empty, repetitive, disconnected. Relationships that once felt supportive now reveal deep patterns of dependency. Workplaces that once offered stability now feel like energetic prisons that suffocate your newly found authenticity. This decoupling from the collective unconscious is never intentional. It happens organically. Your frequency simply becomes incompatible with the unconscious vibration of the masses. You find yourself in a psychological limbo, a kind of inner no man's land, where the old world has lost its attraction, but the new world hasn't fully materialized yet. The professional consequences become radical and unavoidable. Careers built on compromise or adaptation collapse immediately. Your body rejects anything misaligned with your truth. Meetings that once felt boring become physically intolerable. Projects that once seemed merely uninspiring now cause real physiological symptoms. This is not psychosomatic in the conventional sense. It is a direct, measurable response to energetic dissonance. Your nervous system becomes so refined that even slight deviations from your authentic path feel like pain. When your inner frequency rises to a level that no longer matches the structure of your old life, the world around you begins to reorganize itself with a precision that feels almost surgical. At first, this dismantling seems chaotic, even cruel. Financial stability can suddenly shake. Income streams that once felt predictable start drying out, not because you failed, but because they were built on energetic incoherence. Anything that was sustained by self-betrayal, emotional compromise, or misalignment with your truth begins to collapse. It feels as if the universe is methodically unplugging you from every structure that no longer resonates with the person you are becoming. Yet this collapse is not punishment. It is demolition before reconstruction. A building raised on weak foundations must be torn down before a stronger one can rise. Every false agreement, every role you once played to be accepted, every relationship sustained by fear rather than truth, everything must fall so that what is real can finally emerge. Romantic relationships undergo the most dramatic transformations. Partnerships based on unconscious projections, emotional codependency, or social expectations become impossible to maintain. Not because you stop loving the person, but because your new frequency demands a form of love that is free from possession, attachment, and manipulation, whether intentional or not. You begin to understand what unconditional love truly means. Loving without needing, supporting without rescuing, valuing without clinging. This shift can be heart-shattering because it cuts through illusions with surgical precision. Intimacy itself transforms. Sexual connection evolves from a physical act into an energetic communion. The body becomes a gateway, not an instrument. Touch becomes a language, not a task. Union becomes a ritual of awareness rather than a cycle of desire and release. And paradoxically, this deeper understanding of intimacy may lead you into periods of voluntary celibacy, not from repression, but because shallow connections feel energetically jarring, even painful. Your system can no longer tolerate encounters without presence, depth, or consciousness. If you're a parent, your role expands into something sacred. You stop raising your children in the traditional sense and instead walk beside them as a conscious companion. Their natural authenticity reveals your own unresolved patterns, making them unexpected but powerful spiritual teachers. They mirror your blind spots with innocent precision. Your relationship with your parents and your family of origin also shifts dramatically. Traditions that once felt obvious begin to feel heavy, not because you reject love, but because certain patterns can no longer live inside your frequency. You may be forced to set boundaries, gentle, firm, and necessary. This distance is not abandonment, it is integrity. It is love without self-sacrifice. You stop confirming people in their unconscious patterns, even if it means relationships become distant or superficial. Friendships undergo a natural selection process. People aligned with authenticity and inner growth are drawn to you almost magnetically. Others drift away effortlessly, not because you chose to release them, but because the resonance simply disappeared. Your social circle becomes smaller, but infinitely deeper. Even spiritual communities can become challenging. Many groups, often unknowingly, operate from a place of spiritual materialism, treating consciousness as a trophy or identity. Your integrated frequency can be disruptive in these environments, exposing the difference between authentic embodiment and spiritual ego. You may unintentionally become a mirror for others' unhealed wounds, awakening projections, envy, or misunderstanding. This is not your fault. It is part of the territory. The psychological isolation that arises during this phase is not pathology. It is incubation. Just as a butterfly must remain in its cocoon until it is fully formed, you too require periods of solitude to stabilize your new identity. These phases of withdrawal are not depression or avoidance. They are integration. Your psyche reorganizes itself at a higher level of complexity, and this process demands silence, slowness, and space. Paradoxically, solitude becomes a deeper form of connection, Being alone no longer means being separate. It means being in continuous contact with the universal intelligence that moves through everything. Silence becomes a language. Stillness becomes a teacher. Meditation stops being something you do and becomes something you are. The boundary between spiritual practice and everyday life dissolves completely. Creativity during this phase becomes transpersonal. Art, writing, music, or new ideas flow through you as if from another dimension. Your role shifts from creator to channel. The force that expresses itself through you is vast, powerful, and sometimes overwhelming. It requires new ways of sharing because traditional categories of art or work cannot contain the depth of what is emerging. The ultimate challenge is learning to live in the world without being of it, remaining fully human while simultaneously experiencing yourself as consciousness itself. In this state, even ordinary routines transform. Eating becomes intuitive communication with your body. You begin to sense the energetic quality of foods, feeling the difference between an apple grown with care and one produced in industrial stress. Your body reacts not from belief, but from deep physiological intelligence. Your living space shifts too. You no longer arrange your home based on aesthetics alone, but based on how each object affects your inner state. Your environment becomes a tool for clarity, alignment, and peace. This path is not for the faint-hearted. It strips you down, rebuilds you, isolates you, frees you, and transforms you. But through all of it, one thing remains true. You are becoming the version of yourself you were always meant to be. And here, in this space, on Unshakable Mind, you are not walking this journey alone. I invite you to share your experiences in the comments, subscribe, and become part of a community that understands the depth of this transformation. As your inner frequency becomes more refined, your relationship with your physical environment transforms into a subtle form of energetic architecture. Colors, materials, and even the precise placement of objects no longer follow aesthetic intuition alone. They become part of a natural process of frequency optimization. Certain spaces begin to drain your energy almost instantly, while others feel like sanctuaries that recharge you on a cellular level. Your home, once simply a functional space, evolves into a consciously curated energetic field, a living organism aligned with your vibration. Every object you own must justify its presence energetically. If it does not resonate, it naturally disappears from your environment, often without dramatic decisions. It simply no longer belongs. Your relationship with technology undergoes the most drastic shift. Electronic devices stop feeling like neutral tools. Instead, they reveal themselves as transmitters of specific vibrational patterns. Smartphones, computers, consoles, all of them can become energetic parasites when used excessively, subtly draining your clarity and destabilizing your energetic field. Without forcing anything, you begin to develop a media diet, based not on ideology, but on energetic effect. News, social platforms, and entertainment designed around chaos and fear feel physically repulsive. Your system accepts only what expands consciousness, not what fractures it. Your geographic sensitivity reaches extraordinary precision. You can feel the energetic signature of different places on Earth with uncanny accuracy. Cities with dense stress fields can overwhelm your nervous system, while natural landscapes or spiritually charged locations allow profound regeneration. This energetic resonance directly influences where you travel, where you work, and ultimately where you choose to live. You are magnetically drawn to environments that support your evolution, and equally repelled by places that would pull you back into old patterns. Even weather patterns begin acting as amplifiers or dampeners of your consciousness. Full moons, solar storms, atmospheric pressure shifts all become perceptible influences, almost like cosmic signals interacting with your nervous system. The seasons themselves reshape your internal rhythm. Spring ignites renewal. Summer amplifies creative fire. Autumn invites introspective refinement. Winter opens gateways to deep inner silence. Health and illness are no longer interpreted as random medical events, but as complex communication systems. Your symptoms stop being enemies to suppress and instead become messengers, revealing energetic imbalances or unresolved tensions within your psyche. Healing happens through cooperation with your body, not opposition. Your thoughts, emotions, and vibrational orientation become direct variables in your health equation. Alternative healing modalities, acupuncture, energetic therapies, homeopathy, frequency-based treatments produce stronger results for you than for the average person. Your heightened sensitivity magnifies their effects because your system is almost transparent to subtle energies. Your dream life expands into an active communication channel between your conscious and unconscious mind. Dreams stop being neurological noise. They become structured messages from your inner intelligence. Lucid dreams arise naturally, not through techniques, but because your consciousness no longer fully turns off while you sleep. The boundary between the dream state and waking state becomes porous. Prophetic dreams or precognitive visions may occur, revealing future possibilities or hidden truths within the present moment. Your understanding of time becomes non-linear, a tapestry rather than a line. Your relationship with death transforms profoundly. Death no longer appears as a threat or an ending, but as a natural movement of consciousness from one state to another. This understanding isn't intellectual, it's experiential. Fear of loss evaporates because you no longer identify solely with your physical form. You begin to sense the continuity beneath all forms. Grief becomes a deep spiritual initiation. The loss of loved ones opens doorways to expanded states of awareness, revealing the mysterious continuity that binds all consciousness. Pain becomes a teacher, not an adversary. Your experience of time changes entirely. Past and future lose their grip on your mind. You live increasingly in an expanded now, a present moment that feels both timeless and time-aware. Plans and goals become fluid, organic. Instead of forcing life, you follow an inner navigation system based on resonance, intuition, and alignment. Your life becomes an improvised symphony, guided by presence rather than expectation. Even aging gains a new meaning. It is no longer associated with decline, but with deep maturation. Each phase of life brings specific gifts of consciousness, and physical changes become invitations for psychological refinement. Integrating these expansions requires immense inner elasticity. You now exist between multiple layers of reality, the collective social reality, and your own expanded perception, and you must navigate both without collapsing into either. Social functionality remains possible, but no longer depends on fitting in. It becomes a conscious choice, not a survival mechanism. This multidimensional life demands unwavering integrity. You become an active participant in the evolution of human consciousness, not through teaching or guiding others, but simply through the presence you emit. Your existence becomes a silent catalyst. As this metamorphosis deepens, the boundaries between spirituality and everyday life dissolve completely. You don't practice spirituality anymore. You are spirituality in motion. The dramatic experiences of earlier stages soften into a quiet, unwavering presence. You no longer need extraordinary states to feel whole, because wholeness has become your natural state. This inner peace radiates as a form of gravitational energy. People feel drawn to you, not because of something you do, but because of who you have become. Your presence alone becomes a field of healing for those around you. Without speaking, without intervening, you uplift others simply by existing. Your frequency transmits itself like a subtle signal, raising the vibration of anyone who enters your orbit. This is the essence of a fully integrated consciousness. And this is the path we explore here together on Unshakable Mind. If you're feeling these shifts in your own life, tell me in the comments. Your story might resonate with someone who needs it today. When your inner frequency becomes coherent, something extraordinary begins to happen around you. An anxious child who sits beside you suddenly feels calmer without understanding why. A friend drowning in depression finds an unexpected spark of hope after spending just a few minutes in your presence. This transmission does not happen through words, advice, or conscious intention. It happens through resonance. Your integrated energetic field activates dormant potentials in others. You become a living demonstration of what human consciousness can evolve into without ever announcing it, preaching it, or trying to prove anything. It simply radiates from you. Your professional life also transforms. Whatever you do for work, whether you're a baker, a teacher, a programmer, a driver, a therapist, or an entrepreneur, your job becomes a channel for consciousness, not merely a source of income. A baker with a coherent field doesn't just bake bread. They nourish souls. A teacher doesn't just deliver information. They awaken potential. A creator doesn't just produce content. They shift the frequency of everyone who comes in contact with their work. This transformation is not forced. It's not a strategy. It happens organically, naturally, effortlessly. People feel it. Clients feel it. Co-workers feel it. Everyone who enters your energetic orbit is subtly touched by your integration. And then something unexpected happens. Financial abundance begins to appear, seemingly out of nowhere. Not because you chase it, not because you manipulate it, but because universal energy flows where it will be best used. Money becomes a tool for consciousness. It moves toward you when needed for authentic purposes and dissolves from your life when tied to ego or insecurity. To people still caught in scarcity thinking, your abundance looks like luck, coincidence, or magic. Meanwhile, material possessions lose their meaning as symbols of status or safety. You use them, but you are no longer defined by them. Your intimate relationships evolve into dimensions that traditional romance cannot describe. Partnership becomes a conscious alliance for mutual expansion. Sexuality becomes a form of meditation, an encounter in which both partners recognize one another as expressions of the same universal awareness. This intimacy demands something rare, total vulnerability and simultaneous emotional independence. You love fully without possessing. You surrender completely without losing yourself. You support unconditionally without controlling. This paradox becomes your natural way of loving. Children, whether your own or others, transform into spiritual teachers. Their presence reflects back the unconscious patterns you still hold, while your presence provides a powerful energetic field that protects their natural wisdom instead of suppressing it. Education becomes a sacred partnership. You don't mold them, you accompany them. You don't impose rules, you embody principles. Children around you often develop extraordinary emotional intelligence and spiritual sensitivity because they grow inside a field of authenticity rather than conditioning. Your relationship with health and illness shifts into an entirely new dimension. The body becomes a precise feedback system that communicates energetic imbalances with clarity. Symptoms are no longer problems to fight. They are messages to decode. Healing occurs through conscious dialogue with your body, organs, tissues, and even cellular processes. This communication is not metaphorical. It is an energetic reality, a bridge between awareness and form. Aging becomes a conscious refinement, not a decline. You stop resisting time and instead cooperate with its cycles. Your body doesn't grow old, it matures. Each phase of life expresses a new quality of wisdom. The fear of death dissolves completely. You begin to recognize your identity beyond the physical form. Death is no longer perceived as an end, but as a transition, a movement of awareness into another dimension. Grief transforms from despair into a sacred initiation. You miss the physical presence of loved ones while simultaneously celebrating your eternal connection with them. Your creativity expands beyond the personal. Art, music, writing, or any expression begins to flow as if guided by an intelligence greater than your own. You become a channel for a creative force that heals, awakens, and elevates consciousness. People are touched by your work even when you never intended to teach or inspire. Your creativity becomes a vehicle for collective healing. You also begin to perceive your individual evolution as part of humanity's larger evolutionary process. We are moving toward higher states of consciousness together, and you become a conscious participant in this shift. You understand that every moment you live authentically contributes to raising the collective field of human awareness. You stop engaging with politics or social issues through indignation or ideology. You act from understanding. Outer change emerges only from inner transformation. Your activism becomes a frequency, not a fight. You change the world by embodying a new possibility, not by battling the old one. Your integrated being becomes a silent revolution. Community forms around you without effort. People who resonate with your frequency are naturally drawn into your life. These connections are not based on rules, dogma, or hierarchy, but on shared understanding and mutual recognition. And ultimately, a deep maturity emerges. You embrace your humanity completely. You stop trying to be spiritually perfect. You stop trying to transcend your imperfections. You simply become a fully integrated human being. Your ordinariness becomes extraordinary because it is entirely authentic. This is the final synthesis. Light and shadow, joy and sorrow, birth and death, self and cosmos, all recognized as expressions of the same unified field. Duality collapses. Integration becomes your natural state, and from that state, you begin to live a life that silently transforms everything around you. In this final stage of awakening, every boundary you once believed separated the spiritual from the ordinary dissolves into a single luminous understanding. Everything is one. The divisions your mind once constructed, right and wrong, sacred and mundane, beginning and end, fade into the deeper recognition that all experiences emerge from the same universal consciousness that breathes. Through you, your life becomes a living masterpiece, not shaped by external expectations or rigid doctrines, but by the quiet, organic intelligence of your own unfolding. You no longer attempt to control reality. Instead, you co-create with it effortlessly. This power does not come from force, but from total surrender to the present moment. And in that surrender, something extraordinary happens. You realize the thing you've been searching for your entire life has been inside you all along. The seeker dissolves, the search ends, and what remains is truth. You return to yourself, yet you are no longer the same person who began the journey. You come home not to a small identity, but to the infinite intelligence at the core of your being. Your personal realization becomes universal realization. Your inner peace becomes peace for the world around you. This is the highest form of human integration, not the perfection of the individual, but the dissolution of the illusion of separation. You live as a human being, but you know yourself as cosmic consciousness. You act as a person, but you understand yourself as the universe in motion. In this state, life itself becomes meditation. Every breath becomes prayer. Every moment becomes revelation. You are no longer a spiritual seeker. You are a living expression of the spirituality that permeates all existence. And this expression emerges effortlessly, without trying to appear wise, holy, or elevated. Spirituality becomes your natural way of being, not a practice, but a state of consciousness. The deeper layers of this cosmic integration reveal dimensions beyond all spiritual theories, beyond psychology, beyond anything language can contain. You enter a realm where the difference between you and the world collapses completely. Observer and observed merge. The lover and the beloved are recognized as one. This collapse is not philosophical, it is a living reality, pulsing through every cell of your body. Life becomes a continuous revelation. Every interaction, every sound, every ordinary moment is recognized as a direct expression of the Absolute. You no longer search for spiritual meaning behind events. You perceive the events themselves as the voice of the universe. Time transforms. Linear time dissolves into a circular, living eternity where past, present, and future coexist within a single expanded moment. You don't move through time. Time moves through you. Space loses its rigidity and becomes a breathing field of living consciousness. Your physical body stops feeling like a barrier between you and the world and becomes a focal point through which universal intelligence expresses itself. You feel infinitely small and infinitely vast at the same time. Communication with others becomes telepathic, not in a supernatural sense, but as a natural consequence of recognizing unity. You understand people through energy rather than words. Conversations become multidimensional exchanges, where layers of consciousness communicate simultaneously. Your presence itself becomes transformative. People feel touched, even if they're far away. Your energy signature reaches them across space and time. You become a living transmitter of higher consciousness. Creativity flows through you with cosmic intensity. Art, music, writing, whatever you express, no longer comes from personal inspiration, but from direct downloads of universal intelligence. You are not simply creating, you are participating consciously in the cosmic creative process. Your creations often contain prophetic qualities, revealing truths that become clear only in the future. You are not just an artist, you are a vision bearer for a world awakening. Your relationship with the body evolves into a profound partnership. The body becomes a sensitive instrument for navigating multidimensional states of consciousness. Sensations become accurate indicators of energetic shifts. Illness and health are understood as information systems, extending far beyond individual concerns. Your body may mirror collective imbalances or act as a channel of healing for others. You participate consciously in planetary healing. Sexuality becomes cosmic, no longer a personal act, but a meditation on the unity of all existence. Union dissolves boundaries. Two bodies become expressions of the same universal force recognizing itself. Orgasm becomes an ecstatic expansion into the infinite. Dreams transform into conscious voyages through dimensions of reality. Sleep is no longer unconscious rest. It becomes interdimensional work. You can move between realms, gather insights, deliver healing, and navigate multi-layered states of being. Lucid dreaming becomes natural, but even that is only the beginning. You become multidimensional awareness, capable of existing across different layers of reality at once. The boundary between waking and dreaming dissolves. Death is no longer a threat, but a doorway, a shift of expression, not an end. You recognize consciousness as immortal. This is not belief, it is certainty. Communication with those who have passed becomes natural, not as supernatural ritual, but as continuation of unity. Children respond to you with instant recognition, as if they remember you from before this lifetime. They sense your frequency. You protect their innate spiritual wisdom. You teach not with words, but with presence. Their intuition, sensitivity, and awareness grow simply by being near you. Animals approach you without fear. Wild animals may walk near you. Domestic animals seek your presence for comfort and healing. Even the natural world responds. Plants flourish around you, and atmospheric phenomena may synchronize with your emotional field. Nature recognizes your frequency as its own, and as all of this unfolds, your journey becomes a beacon for others. That is why communities naturally form around you, not based on beliefs or rituals, but on resonance. People feel drawn to your presence because your frequency awakens something ancient within them. And if you're watching this right now on Unshakable Mind, it's because something in your soul recognizes this truth. Something in you is remembering who you really are. If this message resonates with you, subscribe to Unshakable Mind, leave a comment, share your insights, and join this collective awakening. Your journey matters. Your voice matters. You are part of this unfolding consciousness. This is not the end. This is the beginning of who you truly are. As your inner states evolve into complete energetic coherence, your relationship with the world shifts into something luminous, effortless, and profoundly intentional. You begin to understand that money, resources, and material abundance are not random outcomes of external circumstances. They are reflections of your inner alignment. Financial flow becomes an energetic language. Scarcity and abundance reveal themselves not as economic conditions, but as precise mirrors of how harmonized or fragmented your inner field is. In this level of integration, you don't chase money, you guide it. You don't cling to resources. You allow them to move exactly where they need to be. Wealth no longer appears as accumulation. It manifests as a fluid river of energy responding to the highest good. You become a conscious channel through which universal abundance can redistribute itself to where it is most needed. You recognize that you are not the owner of wealth, but the steward of a cosmic current that benefits all beings. Your consciousness expands into a global and even cosmic dimension. You begin to feel, not just understand intellectually, that your individual transformation is part of a much larger evolutionary movement unfolding across the entire universe. Your inner growth is no longer personal development, it is planetary participation. You sense the pulse of Earth, the rhythm of humanity, the unfolding of larger galactic cycles, and your decisions naturally align with these broader movements. Without trying, you begin to perceive universal laws, evolutionary currents, and deep energetic patterns that guide existence. You understand what the ancient mystics meant when they said that the universe speaks through intuition. Your choices become wiser, quieter, cleaner. You move with the currents rather than against them. Your spirituality becomes completely normal, so natural that it no longer feels like spirituality at all. You're not a spiritual person trying to be human or a human trying to be spiritual. You become the synthesis of both, the complete expression of cosmic consciousness in human form. This integration reveals itself not as something dramatic or extraordinary, but as simplicity itself. You live with the same effortless naturalness with which a bird flies or a river flows. Nothing needs to be achieved anymore. Nothing needs to be proven. There's no more trying to ascend, improve, accomplish, or become enlightened. You realize that there was never anything missing. The paradox of completion is the recognition that there is nothing to complete. What you were seeking was always present, always fully available, always within you. And in that moment of total realization, every spiritual concept dissolves, every psychological theory fades, every method, every practice, every technique becomes unnecessary. What remains is simply presence, the radiant presence of what is. You are no longer someone who has consciousness. You are consciousness appearing as a human experience. From this understanding emerges a silence, not the silence of inactivity, but the silence that is the source of all movement. You live in perfect harmony with the cosmos, not because you adjusted yourself to it, but because you discovered that you and the cosmos have always been the same reality, expressing itself in different forms. Life becomes an infinite dance of joy, not because suffering disappears, but because you realize that suffering and joy are both expressions of the same singular reality. Nothing is rejected, nothing is avoided, everything is honored, everything is seen as part of the great unfolding. And then the deepest truth reveals itself. These so-called signs of high vibration were never skills you developed. They were simply the natural expressions of who you truly are, expressions that appeared the moment your inner obstacles dissolved. You never became this frequency. You always were this frequency, experiencing yourself temporarily as a limited human. The journey ends exactly where it began, in the recognition that there was never a journey. No traveler, no destination. Only consciousness exploring itself through the illusion of separation. It dreamed of being human, so it could rediscover itself in every heartbeat, every struggle, every breath. It created forgetting, so that remembering could be the most beautiful revelation. Every tear you shed, every moment of fear, every doubt, every fall, every confusion, none of it was a failure, none of it was a mistake. It was consciousness meeting itself from different angles, learning its own depths through the mirror of experience. And now the dream has completed its cycle. The veil falls. The recognition dawns. A silent, indescribable peace fills your entire being, not the peace of having reached something, but the peace of realizing you never lacked anything. You are home. You have always been home. And home is not a place. It is this very recognition. Home is knowing that you are what you were seeking. Home is being what you have always been. Home is the final dissolution of all searching into the radiant simplicity of what eternally is. And what eternally is you. Not the small you, not the personality, not the limited identity, but the you with a capital Y, the you that is everything and nothing, form and emptiness, time and eternity, human and divine. These signs, these insights, these teachings, they were breadcrumbs left by you, for you, pointing the way back to yourself. Now that you have returned, the signs are no longer needed. Only this remains, the infinite, unnameable presence that you truly are. This is the end of the story, but not the end of you, because what you are never began and will never end. There is only the eternal now, the eternal here, the eternal being. The journey dissolves, the seeker dissolves. Only the pure reality remains, and that reality is love without limits, consciousness without center, peace without opposite. This is your inheritance, your birthright, your eternal nature. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to become. You are already that, always have been, always will be. The search is over, only truth remains, and truth is playing endlessly as all forms, including the one listening to these words now. Welcome home, beloved consciousness. Welcome to the recognition of your infinite nature. Welcome to the eternal celebration of what never left and never arrived. Because it always simply is. Namaste. The divine in me recognizes the divine in you, because there is no me and you. There is only the divine recognizing itself through every form. And as this understanding settles in your being, remember, if this message touched you, resonated with you, or awakened something within you, subscribe to Unshakable Mind, because this channel exists to guide you back to the truth of who you are, again and again, in deeper and more profound ways. Leave a comment. Share your experience and let us know what this journey awakened in you. Your presence here is not coincidence. It is synchronicity. It is calling. It is remembrance. Welcome home. Always home, unshakably home.